Hey everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Recon. Today we're going to look at a question on the subreddit Ask Reddit. And today's question is, what are some of the darker effects COVID-19 has had that we don't talk about? So we're going to go ahead and drop down in the comments section and take a look through these. I'm sure some of them are going to be really sad. Pediatrician here, we've had multiple babies and toddlers brought to the hospital by police for found alone in the home with caregiver deceased. So many people have been getting pets, the veterinarians can't keep up. There is also a very real chance that animal shelters are going to be overloaded with abandoned pets once people stop working from home. From my understanding, this is already beginning to happen. Not sure about the overloaded part, but at least the returning part. Not just from people who have died from COVID and their pets being sent to the shelter, but also people going back to work who can't keep up with caring for an animal like they could while working from home. Part of this is due to animals having severe separation anxiety and poor training, and there being a lack of animal trainers behaviorists to help. My brother, who works for DSS, said during the pandemic, child abuse reports plummeted, which likely means, unfortunately, that rather than there being less abuse, there are less chances for people like teachers having a chance to catch and report the signs. I am a foster parent. DCS told us they were overwhelmed with cases because domestic violence and abuse from everyone being at home all the time. In our area, there are not enough workers or foster parents for children. It's definitely a dark side of the pandemic. Well, everyone else has mentioned mental health, but what I think is worth pointing out is how COVID massively accentuated political and social division within Western countries. It's been leveraged to have that effect, and I mean hard leverage through social media and all kind of propaganda. Someone seriously wants America to tear itself apart with a civil war, and some of those people are Americans. Not only America, tensions have been on the rise in Europe, Canada, Australia, and South America as well. I personally found it a little suspicious how everyone is being pushed into this pro-vax and anti-vax argument, and nobody is focusing on how people were left in the dirt by our government while the ultra-rich made record amount of money off of us. Dude, nailed it. I've long been suspicious that just about everything that divides the masses is just a distraction presented by the upper class to keep us from noticing how badly they're effing us. The work environment has been rather toxic. I work in a company where some people have the option to stay home while others don't, and it's caused a lot of resentment between departments. I see that resentment some too. People who had to come in were resentful that some got to work remote. Now they're making everyone come in some, and those who could work remote are resentful. Honestly, I was the opposite of resentment. I work IT, and when the pandemic started and everyone was at home while I still had to come in, it was bliss. No one there to bother me, no pleasantries, and all form of dress code went out the window. I could also park right up front instead of taking whatever was left. I was hoping the company would stay like that. Don't forget the best part, no one walking up to your desk to angrily complain about something that's their own fault. This is definitely not one that I would have thought of. How much hearing impaired people were affected. My mother, who wears hearing aids, also depends on reading lips, especially in the louder, busier areas. Hearing aids can have trouble sorting through complex noise situations. You can imagine what happened when everyone covered their mouths. Now she's more isolated than ever. Since then, I ran into a coworker who is also hearing impaired, but doesn't want to return to the office because while she can read lips on Zoom, she won't be able to if we all mask up in person. They are an invisible casualty of this pandemic. I didn't realize how much I was relying on watching someone's mouth to hear properly. Now I have to lean without getting my face in someone's face when I have a conversation at normal speaking volume or when there's any outside noise. A skyrocket in domestic abuse as families are forced inside with one another, coupled with financial issues or just people being stuck with abusive partners with nowhere to go. Also increased alcohol consumption. My older brother drank so much that he went from pre-cirrhosis to cirrhosis to dead in a year. COVID really ruined his life. I kinda stopped drinking so much because I realized I didn't like being drunk by myself in my apartment. Same, my drinking got pretty bad for a while, but ultimately made me realize I maybe don't care for it all that much anymore. Going on 2 weeks completely sober and feel great. More division between families because of opinion, beliefs on how to deal with COVID. I never had any major issues with my family, but we fall in different camps now on COVID. My wife and I are requiring masks while around our newborn and are not letting anyone but us hold her until she has had her vaccinations. This is not just due to COVID, but also RSV currently being sky high. My mother constantly chafes against our boundaries and accepts them only begrudgingly, and is clearly miffed not being allowed to hold her. It just breaks my heart that she can't see that we're only doing this to protect our daughter, not to be cruel to them. These requirements apply to everyone regardless of vaccination status. I'm just glad my in-laws back us up on this. My mom wants to come visit from Florida for my daughter's birthday. I told her if she is vaccinated and tested negative at the airport, she's more than welcome. She decided not to come. Imagine not choosing to see your grandkid because you'd have to feel a pinch for 10 seconds twice and take a test. I lost my brother to COVID. He didn't die. He transformed to a complete asshole. Bill Gates, nanochip, death vaccine, and shit like that. You name it, he believes it and preaches it. Having to cut my father out hurt more than my mother dying in January. My father died in February, a rabid Trump supporter, and the vaccine wasn't available for him yet. A diabetic with a history of health problems, his politicos and madness destroyed our relationship, and I'm unable to mourn him. My comfort for your loss. People who were furloughed had time to realize they hate their job. I can only speak in the service industry, but it feels like a soul-crushing job more than ever. I used to love bartending, and now I feel trapped by it. Everyone I talk to seems to feel the same. The money doesn't seem worth it anymore. Guests are worse and more entitled than ever, and staff shortages have made shifts harder and longer. It has left me with a sense of hopelessness, as it is the only career I've known, but I cannot imagine a future continuing to do it. 911 dispatcher for a small town here, the amount of domestic violence calls I've taken has skyrocketed. It's beginning to seriously drag me down and exhaust me. I also help the local programs try to get food to families with kids. I broke down when I realized some kids only get the food at school. The pandemic closed things down in March and lasted into summer, when a lot of kids would usually have summer school. I had been out of work since March, when schools had closed their doors, and was eager for some kind of work to do. Over the summer, many drivers, including myself, would come to work, get our bus ready, head to a school and pick up numerous coolers full of school-grade lunches, and head into various neighborhoods, church parking lots, and apartment complexes to hand out these lunch kits to kids who are not able to get their meals from school because of the pandemic. It pained me more than I've ever felt being a school bus driver when many of these kids would come up to the school bus alone and thank me for bringing them the only meal they would have for the day, before walking back home and often sharing what they had with siblings who were too young to come out. I gave out extras to the kids I knew were taking care of others, and thankfully we never had a day where we ran out of lunches to give to them. But I will never forget the hardships I observed with these kids and how much extra perspective the pandemic gave me into their day-to-day lives. Being single became crushingly lonely, especially if you were already looking for someone. Me, 25 years old, getting a handle on my depression and finally working a stable job with my own apartment just before COVID hit. I think it's time I get out of my shell and start going out to bars, clubs, lounges, and see what it's all about, and maybe finally meet someone. Me, 27 years old and having spent almost 2 years completely alone, locked in my apartment because I apparently have shitty lungs and will likely die if I catch COVID. What is a date? What is a other person? Old folks getting cut off from their kids and social interactions. I think a lot of them are suffering in silence. My grandfather had been very slowly declining with dementia-type symptoms for a few years. All of a sudden, last spring, he couldn't do his daily trip to the senior center, see his few friends, go for a walk anywhere other than around the block, or see anyone other than my parents with whom he lived with in person. Without that social interaction, his decline accelerated rapidly and he passed away last week. Well, I hope this wasn't too depressing. I just wanted to go through and show some of the darker effects of COVID-19 that people don't really talk about. Have a good one, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.